Hello, salam, shalom, namaste, sat sri akal, aloha, hola, ciao, bonjour, buna, and privyet. It's really, really good to be with you again, and I know you're going to really enjoy joining us today because we have a very special guest, and it's Dr. Mari Kovanen. I hope I said that right.
Yes, absolutely. And to that beautiful list of greetings, I would also like to add my original Finnish hey, which is very, it's quite easy because yeah.
Yes.
So hey,
Hey, I love
it's
it.
so lovely to be here, and I'm really excited about this conversation.
Yes, me too. And Dr. Mari, will you please tell us more about who you are and what you do?
Okay, so I'm a registered psychologist, and I'm also a conscious dating coach. I so I have kind of two roles. So I have a therapy practice, but I've then now moved on to really focusing on dating coaching. And I love everything about relationships and helping people with their relationship at different stages of their relationship. So now we're more talking about kind of finding the right kind of partner and focusing on that.
Very cool. Very cool. So what got you interested in working in this area? I'm wondering with your psychology background and all.
Mm. Well, the psychology I was interested in from day one. I think from the kind of going to, even before university, doing a little bit of sort of um, there like doing what would be your equivalent of high school, I suppose,
Uh,
and then going into psychology. But when we are talking about specifically about relationships, because originally I trained as an occupational psychologist, and I realized that that wasn't giving me the kind of relationships that I wanted to really kind of have, in work and help people with their relationships. But the inspiration really then to do my doctorate and everything came from, I suppose, my own, like often it does, my own struggles and kind of sort of trying to navigate first as a single woman, the dating world, and this was the sort of early days of internet dating when it was still considered a little bit embarrassing and, and only meant for people who were desperate for whatever reason. I don't know. It was new and so on. So that, and then I met my husband, and then I realized that I really wanted to understand more about how we relate with each other, what makes relationship work, why don't they work, and all of that. So that relationship then became really focused on my work and in many different ways and on different levels.
that is so cool. That is so cool. Thank you for sharing that part of your journey with us. And it actually made me think about, I've seen some of the posts that you make on social
Mhm.
media. And I think one of the topics you're so awesome at sort of speaking to is how to navigate the pressures of dating life.
Mm.
Can we let's talk more about that. So in that context, can you maybe start us off by sharing one of the big problems you see your clients facing? Hey, thanks for tuning into this episode. Hope you're getting value out of it. For your information, this episode has been sponsored by the Happiness 101 program. Are you a change maker, coach, trainer, or healer? Are chains of fear holding you back from making the impact and income you desire? Using a unique combination of positive psychology and the spiritual wisdom of our most effective change makers, The Happiness 101 program helps you break through your limiting beliefs and manifest the abundance and success you desire with fun and ease. Interested? Book a free Happiness 101 exploration call with me, your happiness expert, Samia Bano. Just use my online calendar link in the show notes. Now, back to the show.
So when we are, I guess, dating in different phases of our lives is quite different.
Yeah.
So when you are in your 20s maybe, but also there's some cultural differences in that too. But generally, say in your early 20s or so, dating can be quite easy in many ways because you're naturally meeting people in various, you go to study and you meet lots of people and so on. And then the dating sort of changes in some ways. You start to settle more into working world, and yes, you might be meeting people, but maybe you don't want to be meeting those people. You don't want to necessarily. I certainly never wanted. It's almost like that's the secret code. It's like, don't touch that place where you are because it can get really awkward. But of course, some people do find love through that, that way too. But so in your 20s, there's lots of activity, but also, especially for women, when you are approaching maybe late 20s and then going into 30s, and if you haven't found that person, your person yet, and then when you start to realize that your friends are starting to get engaged, and maybe they're living together, or that, there's all of these sort of natural kind of progressions in their relationships, and you start to wonder, well, when is it going to happen for me? And now I'm this and this age. Okay, I'm 29, I'm turning 30, and panic. Will this mean that I will never find that one? Or, okay, I'm turning now 35, and oh my goodness, I've got only limited time, if I want to have a family and all of that. So there's a lot of pressure, especially on women. And men do experience it to a degree, but in a different ways. Of course, it's not exactly the same for them. So yeah, there is this sort of biology, and that can push people to make quite rash decisions sometimes and jump into situations where they realize probably then later on, okay, maybe I didn't think about this kind of really fully. And I think the biggest kind of mistake that I notice that people make is that, especially, excuse me, excuse me. Sorry, just recovering still from a cold a little bit. Especially when you are under that pressure, and I guess Disney in many ways, and all these lovely Hollywood films are all about you meet someone, you meet them in a whatever grocery store or something, or you go somewhere and you meet this person and then you live happily ever after. And not at any point it's like the main, the female character goes through a whole thinking process. It's like, okay, who am I, and what do I really want, and what kind of relationship, and then kind of really sort of assessing, and really in a conscious way and in a very mindful way of thinking about, okay, this is a very big decision, in the same way as when you are choosing a job. You don't just launch into it, whatever kind of looks good on paper. You spend a lot of time assessing, is this the right one or that one or what? So people often kind of launch into relationships, and also, and I made all of these mistakes, so I know from personal experience too. But also, we're not really necessarily always aware the cocktail of hormones that we get intoxicated when we see someone who we are attracted to. And that person might not actually be the right person for a relationship. But if we are not aware, we might think, oh, this chemistry, this amazing cocktail that I'm feeling right now, this must mean that this is, this is love and this is going to be the person for me for however long, and, for a long-term relationship. But actually, not necessarily. Does that person have good relationship qualities? Do they also want the same things in life? Do they share a similar type of lifestyle? And if not, it could be that it's just the attraction. And and so it's really important to kind of slow down even under the kind of the ticking biological clock. In some ways, it's like, there's sometimes this phrase that to go faster, you need to go slower. Because if you try to go faster, you probably end up in the wrong place. But if you take things super slow, you kind of approach it in that sort of way, and maybe you need to reassure yourself and that it will happen. It will happen, but I need to spend some time figuring out who am I and what is it that I want in a relationship? What type of person might be a really good match for me? What type of lifestyle? And I think the lifestyle is really important, because if I'm, for example, a person who, and especially when people enter like 30s, maybe 20s is much more sociable. And when you start to enter your 30s, you're maybe like, okay, well, I've been so social, and yes, I might enjoy social activities, but maybe not to the same degree as, especially with busy careers and everything. So then maybe in my 30s, I want a maybe slightly quiet life in some ways, just to, balance it out and what have you. But if I then meet someone who wants, who wants to go out, and many men, for example, enjoy watching sports. So if it's a guy, taking a very English kind of example here, if it's a guy who loves to go to the pub and watch sports there a lot, and if that's not for you, that's going to create a lot of problems, because your lifestyles are very different and what you want in the long term. So, there is that kind of, one of the biggest mistakes is really the rushing into things without consciously thinking, okay, how will this plan out? And if I spend kind of time getting to know someone and thinking about this, and often the most kind of long-lasting relationships are the ones sort of slow burners almost. Actually interesting, last week at the hairdressers, there was a really sweet lady came there, and this lady, she said, oh, tomorrow is our 60th wedding anniversary. And the hairdresser said, oh, well, I don't know if I would be able to be with my partner for such a long time. It's a very long time. And she said, oh, but we love each other. And she said, don't choose someone who you kind of, immediately fall in love with madly, and choose someone instead who you really like. So I guess she's repeating the same sort of message. They're not just going on and acting on the hormonal kind of cocktail, but actually finding someone whose personality is good. And of course, there needs to be some sort of chemistry too, but that can grow as you get to know someone and appreciate their qualities and so on.
Yeah, you made so many excellent points there. And I think this distinction between the emotional like cocktail that we can experience,
Mm,
that's like so exciting in a way.
mm,
But to not equate that with love in terms
mm,
of the love that um, is needed and necessary for us to create and maintain, especially a long-term relationship.
mm,
That is such a important thing, I think, for us to talk about, because so often um, like I can remember having conversations with friends and family where like relationships crop up because mm, of this exact issue where people are struggling.
Mhm.
Um, because on the one hand, when you're experiencing that emotional cocktail that's so passion fueled and filled and exciting,
Mm,
you feel it. I mean, emotions are the strongest motivators of our actions and our
absolutely.
behaviors. And so it's so difficult to resist
Mm,
where they want to lead us. And, um, this idea that is oftentimes also romanticized in the context of relationships of follow your heart. And you're like, okay,
mm,
experiencing all these intense emotions. And if I follow them, isn't that me following my heart? And isn't that the
mm,
best way for me to find the love that I'm seeking? So it
mm,
gets very confusing, I think, especially if it's like the first time you've experienced
mm.
kind of
Yeah,
intense emotion. Mm,
absolutely. And many people who I've spoken with, it's the first time ever you will remember that person forever. They will leave a mark because it is so intense and it's the first breakup, the first person and the first breakup. It's really intense. And it's not that, you know, is not intense or is not deep with someone else later, but there's something about this kind of new experience. And following your heart, it does not mean that you just act on a whim in some ways. Um, because if you and I guess you need to, and then we are talking about now going into your sort of late 20s and 30s or even, beyond, where you've got some experience about relationships usually, and you understand a little bit about yourself and more, and it's really kind of assessing that, okay, I'm having these, the more you understand yourself, so okay, I'm having these strong feelings about this person, but I also being curious about, I wonder why that is.
mm,
Does the person have these qualities that I'm looking for in a relationship? Okay, do they, are they kind, compassionate? Are they able to openly talk about things? Um, and also kind of, I always say to clients, you know, when you do your list of what you want in a relationship, what type of person, also seek out for evidence on the dates
mm,
so that you are not filling the gaps, because our brain's very good. It's like, okay, if we want something, and if we're attracted to someone, we might just fill in the gaps and then hope for the best. But it's, what does the evidence say? Do
mm.
they have these kind of qualities? Then would mean that there's potential for that long term, because in long term you need the sort of qualities to be able to really work together, and someone who also wants to commit and work through and iron out any kind of difficulties and so on. So that's really important.
Yeah. And you know what it just made me think about also is like depending on our relationship goals, it's like
Mm,
whether I want a long-term, sustainable, loving relationship, or I'm open to having a more short-term, passionate relationship.
mm,
I mean, hopefully, like when we go into it, you don't like, maybe necessarily wish for it to be short term, but
mm,
that you're open to that possibility that it might be short because
mhm,
you're sort of, in that mindset of exploring and
mhm,
discovering. That would also sort of change the kind of strategies that you utilize in um, how you even think about going about like looking for somebody, I suppose,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
opening yourself up to somebody finding you.
Mm,
And in that context, I imagine, there's different dynamics when it comes to navigating, well, what kind of pressures do you experience in the dating context and how to
mm,
navigate them?
mm. Yeah. Oh, you mean like the online dating antics and what, there is so much, and a lot of times people say, oh, but no one really wants commitment. They just want short term, or this kind of situationships, which are really kind of all the relationship benefits except the commitment.
Yeah.
So it looks like on many ways like a relationship, but we are not kind of defined by it. Um, and then one thing I think is really important for us to kind of be aware is that us women are biologically, as much as we sometimes may wish that it wasn't the case, but we are designed in a different way to men. And when I need to mention women's empowerment, I guess has in many ways tried to convince us that we are exactly the same. Whereas, yes, in many ways, we're all humans, but we have also different kind of biological makeup, which then rewards different things. We get rewarded by, certain dopamine and what have you in different ways for different things. And sometimes women have said to me, is like, I tried, I wanted to have this sort of very casual, relaxed attitude to a relationship. But what happened is that when we then actually, it became physically intimate and everything, and then I wanted more, but he didn't.
Mm.
And what's wrong with me now because I can't do it? Well, there are biological reasons explaining it because women very much, there is oxytocin, which is like a cuddle hormone. And with intimacy, physical intimacy, we get that sort of cocktail and that bonds us with that person.
Mm.
Whereas for men, it's a different hormone. So it's, and that it responds in a different way. So we are not the same at all. So in some ways, women need to be quite careful in terms of entering certain type of situations because the chances are quite high that you will burn yourself in those situations. And if you just hope that maybe he will then, decide that he wants to be with you as well, but the chances are that he doesn't. Um, and so there is that kind of, I guess the empowerment piece here for women is that speak up for what you want in a relationship and communicate that from the day one, is that this is what I'm looking for. If he's not on the same page, great, there will be someone else. Don't waste your time on that person. And if you want to explore, go and explore, but be aware that this might lead you in a situation where you get your fingers point, or it becomes really hard for you,
Yeah.
because you've created these feelings, or developed these feelings towards a person who then is not on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you just, made me think about like in my Indian Pakistani culture,
Hmm.
there's a lot of double standard that we experience in society when it comes to how men get to act and how women get to
Hmm.
act and be treated by society in response. And, over the last so many decades, as more and more, at least in the big cities, the cultures have been becoming westernized.
Hmm.
You know, the there is, especially in the upper classes, I know I've experienced, there's this growing openness and movement towards, having a more Western
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle, including
Mm-hmm.
the context of, for example, being open to dating,
Mm.
having relationships, romantic relationships outside of the marriage context, or looking for relationships without the explicit understanding that you are evaluating somebody for the
Mm.
purposes of getting married to them.
Mm-hmm.
And in this context, one of the dynamics that we have seen because of the sort of sexism, I suppose that is part of the culture, unfortunately, that on the one hand, like for example, the women who are, wanting to lead a more empowered and free
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle where they feel more free because, in our traditional culture, um, there was a lot of repression and suppression. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I mean, I understand when people want to feel like, I want to move away from that. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
there's a
Mm-hmm.
sense of wanting freedom. And so then it's like, well, what's the other model that you can follow? And
Mm.
for a lot
Mm.
of us in that context, the other model is what we think we see in the West,
Mm.
working for people. But what happens is that for women who end up, going this route of dating and not necessarily insisting upon, oh, we have to, if you're meeting and so
Mm-hmm.
forth, because we want to get married and so on and so forth. What happens is that a lot of times the relationship will proceed to a certain um, point, and
Mm-hmm.
then the men will back out, and their
Mm.
excuse that they give is that yes, I love to date you, but I don't want to
Mm.
marry you because
Mm.
my family has other expectations of what
Mm.
kind of a wife I have.
Yeah.
And so
Mm.
it's like they're very happy to date women who are open to dating without
Mm.
insisting on marriage. But when it comes time to get married, those are the women that they will reject
Mm. Mm.
because they're going against society's and their
Mm.
families' uh,
Yeah.
vision of what an ideal wife is
Mm.
like. And it's
Yeah.
just so, I find it really, really annoying, to put it mildly.
Mm.
Because then, these women have been labeled and they get
Yeah.
ostracized in
Yeah.
terms of not being struggling even more to find somebody to
Right.
marry.
Yeah.
Um, but the men are given like a free pass, even if they have
Mm.
histories of having dated many women and so forth, they're still considered to be fine, eligible bachelors for
Yeah.
marriage.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
what's with the double standards? And,
Yeah. Yeah.
so like when I think about women's empowerment, just I love the point that you made is that for us as women, like we cannot, our goal and the way that we achieve empowerment cannot be to copy the men. That's
Yeah.
actually
No.
not
Yeah.
empowering at all. We
So
have to
true.
find our
Yeah.
own, we have to find our
Absolutely.
own
Mm.
way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are made in a different way. And also, I mean, that's the richness of it all. I
Yeah.
wouldn't like to be a man. I wouldn't. I have two boys, amazing, and a husband, but I wouldn't like to be a man or a boy. You get different, I think, benefits in some ways for being a woman and different things and different experiences. But you can be kind of equally powerful, but in a different way.
Yes.
And I guess the difficulty is that women be kind of either repressed, don't say anything, but we're talking about more in when you're dating consciously, is that you are empowering yourself to find the right kind of partner. You
Mhm.
are empowering yourself to make decisions that work for you, and asking for your needs to be met, even at the dating stage. I mean, I've, like some clients have said, I said to the guy, I don't like texting. Please don't text me. If you want to speak to me, call me, you know, um, because I don't want to spend all of my time on the text, doing all of, these millions of messages and what have you. I've got no time for it. So, it's like asking, how do I even want to date? And but also going into a relationship, that what is that that I want to have, and what kind, what's important for me. And that's being empowered when you are communicating about your needs and owning your needs,
Yes.
instead of trying to mold yourself to be the 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 right one for that person. If that person is not willing to kind of negotiate, or not even negotiate, but if they're not on the same page, they're just not the right person. And if you then kind of waste your time on that person, then the right person, you're not available for the right person. So let go of that one. And then this other person could be there just around the corner.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, Dr. Mari, what is your definition of love? This kind of love
Mm.
that allows us to create these happy, healthy, sustainable, long-term relationships. How do you, like, when you think about what it means, how do you define that as opposed to, I guess, the more emotional cocktail kind of feel?
Yeah. That is I think some of the ingredients are really commitment to the process, and it very much is a process, and it's a project. It's like the life project, that this shared goal, commitment to it, respecting each other, um, trying to kind of see the sort of approach with compassion. Not always easy, because for depending on the state of your mind and what have you, but of course there is a part of it is this sort of hormonal response, but that does wear out. So then it becomes about friendship
Yeah.
and those shared values and life goals, the commitment to this. Because, yeah, if we don't commit, then that in itself, yeah, there is no, if we don't commit, then what is the point of this then? It's just a passing kind of situationship. So there's so much more. I think kind of friendship base is a really good, in the same way as that little lady at the hairdressers was saying about, find someone who you actually like.
Yes.
And then the everything extra kind of comes on top of it. But
Yeah.
that helps you to navigate many kind of situations in life.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, you just made me think about a quote. I can't remember who the quote is by, but it's something to the effect of this person. It might be Martin Luther King Jr. I'm not sure, but I
Mm-hmm.
think it might have been him, or it was one of the other big leaders that we know who committed to the practice of nonviolence,
Mm.
everything that you do. And so, in the context of practicing nonviolence, there's a value of unconditionally loving everyone.
Mm. Mm.
And so in somebody was questioning this leader about, well, how can you just love everyone? And what does that even mean? What does that look like? What does that
Mm.
feel like? And so he said, you know, I love everybody in the sense well, but I don't necessarily always like
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
And so he made that distinction between love and
Absolutely.
like. And so for him, the love that he was talking about is this a love, like a spiritual level love that you can
Mm.
actually cultivate for anyone and everyone, even
Mm.
your enemies, people who have hurt you, because the spiritual love is more of a recognition of how we are all connected to each other. Like
Yeah.
whether we
Yeah.
like each other or not, we're
Mm.
still, part of this interconnected, interdependent
Mm.
whole, and we
Mm.
impact each other in all kinds of ways. And so to recognize that is, a form of experiencing
Mm.
spiritual love, and to, you know, and because, with nonviolence, you're committed to not harming anyone else.
Yeah.
And the underlying motivation for that comes from this recognition of we're all interconnected, we're all interdependent. And so if you
Mm.
hurt someone else directly or indirectly, you end up hurting yourself. And
Mm.
so, from that place, you practice unconditional love for
Yeah.
everyone, but you don't necessarily always like
Mm.
somebody.
Absolutely.
And for me, it made me think about, and what you were just sharing, it made me think about how oftentimes we downplay, like we think liking somebody is like a lower
Mm.
value or a lower level of how you can relate to somebody,
Mm. Mm.
and loving is more and better.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
actually, in the context of the relationships, um, liking is really, really, really important.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's we need to separate the person from the actions. Um, Absolutely. We can love someone, but they might have qualities and actions that absolutely drive us bonkers. Um, and then as I was saying that trying to find the compassion and seeing that we are all here trying to figure out this life and we all struggle in different ways at different times. But the intention is that the person's intentions are good, even if it may come out in the wrong way
Yeah.
right now. And especially when we're talking about partners and kind of, relationships and trying to see that we're all here, but also often trying to see, and this is maybe in dating, one needs to be a little bit careful with this. This is more about when we're talking about in an established relationship that trying to see that the other person is they kind of the inner child, the hurting inner child acting.
Mhm.
So what I'm saying that we need to be cautious about that when we are dating, that we don't make excuses for someone's bad behavior by saying, oh,
Mhm.
but they've had such a hard life and now they're behaving in this way.
Yeah.
Okay, that's probably true, but you don't need to be the rescuer,
Right.
or should not be a rescuer as a partner.
Yeah.
So then if that is the case and you meet someone, you need to be kind of really here, you need to feel, be empowered and really look, but what could this person offer for me in the relationship? Could they actually offer anything that I'm looking for in a relationship? There are other sources where they can get support for
Mm.
their suffering.
Right.
Um, mm,
Oh, you just made me think about one of my dearest friends who got engaged a while back. This was a while back. And the person that she got engaged to um, turned out, like, as she got to know him more,
mm,
she found that he had this very intense side to him that would come out, like, when you first met him,
mm,
seemed to be very normal and just
yeah,
fine. all that. But as she got to know him better, it's like, oh, there's all this like stuff that he went through, and there's this intense side to him
mm,
that comes out, especially when we're alone. And my friend actually happens to be like a brilliant relationship coach herself.
mm,
And so she saw like she could deal with him.
mm,
She could sort of respond with compassion and
mhm,
this and that. Um, but when it came down to like making the decision of, okay, should we get married? Where is this relationship going? Do we want to keep this relationship going?
mm,
He was very attached to her because
mm,
he was like, oh, you're the first person I've met
mm.
who understands me, who's able to help me. So he just wanted to hold on to her and not
Yeah,
let
yeah.
go. But I think what she shared with me about why
Mm,
she finally decided to break it off with him is because she was like, I didn't want to be his therapist. I didn't
yeah,
want to be his
yeah,
coach. I didn't, like
yeah,
I want a partner who is my partner and
yeah,
not
yeah,
my client,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
so this I think also, this is also something that I think I have a little bit of a pet peeve when it comes to like one of the in my Indian Pakistani culture, that a
Mhm,
lot of times, especially, this expectation is placed on women where the men have all kinds of problems, and
mm,
their family, their solution, it seems like, no, their solution is, oh, let's get him married.
mm.
Everything will be
That was
fine
sorted
once you get
out.
married. And I'm like, no, how can you like, and how can the parents and the family of the girl find
Mm,
that kind of thinking acceptable? Because it may or may not work out great for the guy to have
yeah, yeah,
a wonderful, caring woman that he gets to marry, and she may or may not be able to actually end up helping him. But what about
absolutely.
the
Mm,
woman, who's going to
yeah,
have to deal with this man who's traumatized and
mm,
acting out and all of that kind
yeah,
of stuff? That's not a fair, I think, exchange.
no,
Yeah.
no,
But
no.
there's like so much pressure and
Mm,
expectation that no,
yeah,
you're a woman, it's your job, it's your role to be a caregiver, and
mm,
that he needs you, that
mm,
so and you want to be needed, you feel like you need, like you feel like somehow we actually choose to stay in the relationship because we're like, oh, I can help this person
yeah,
heal, and um that makes you feel needed and maybe important, or I don't know what
mm,
else,
mm,
and so you actually can make that the motivation to stay,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's not always necessarily a very healthy or wise
No,
motivation.
no, no. And they're usually in that scenario,
Mm.
that person initially the helper, or there's this kind of a drama triangle, where that if you're the rescuer,
Mm.
you might initially kind of get your needs met by feeling exactly wanted and needed, and that's all nice. But if you try to help this person who's kind of falling into this sort of victim mode, and when he then doesn't act in the way that you want him to, and there's the frustration, and then it's like, yes, but I thought that if I give you all of this, you will then become this person.
Yeah.
But it's the person, the guy in this case, he needs to find his own way. She won't be able to do it.
Yeah.
So then there's if she will become frustrated, and this relationship is not in any way kind of, she's not getting what she was hoping to get, is an equal partner.
Yeah.
And over time, that's really is really draining.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, okay, so I have one more question.
Okay.
I was like, I just looked at the time and I was like, "Woo,
Mhm.
I think we better start wrapping up." But I
Mhm.
have one more question at least for you.
Mhm.
And so we talked a lot about today, the cocktail of emotions that we can feel and, sort of being driven by them.
Mhm.
My question is, do you have any tips for how to manage, like if you're experiencing that kind of passion or, that cocktail of emotions, any tips for how to manage that so that we can not let that be the sole driver of our
Mhm.
behavior and we can
Mm.
take some of that slower yeah, and also be able to slow ourselves down, as you were
Yeah.
saying, in some
Mhm.
ways, take that
Yeah.
bigger perspective and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So many things, but it's self-awareness first of all, and understanding maybe what this person kind of, what is it about this person? Is it just their appearance, or quite likely that there's going to be something about this person that triggers maybe past wounds within us.
Ah,
And this is an intent. So we need to be really self-aware. So there's that piece of understanding my own history, relationships. When did I not get my needs met in relationships? And also having your kind of concrete list, exactly what do I want in a relationship? What would that relationship look like? And doing maybe meditations on that and really spending kind of connecting inwards. And grounding oneself. And yes, if it feels okay, depending on how, I suppose, for some people dating multiple people at the same time is okay. From others it might feel draining. So if the reason why it might be helpful, because then you're not kind of putting your eggs in one basket and getting too involved with one person, but you are actually keeping your options open, so it can be helpful. Because if you're just getting to know someone, you're going for maybe, I don't know, coffee dates or something like that, when you're really getting to know. So you are sort of being able to then slow down and getting to know someone, and not interviewing, but kind of like it's an exchange. And then at the same time, listening all the time, that am I hearing and also observing this type of behaviors that I'm looking for in the relationship. So yeah, all of this, and journaling also, kind of really understanding what's going on. All of those kind of things can be really helpful.
mm,
And maybe, yeah, it's maybe setting some rules for myself that, okay, and I guess one thing is really to say, okay, if I set a rule that there is no um, physical intimacy before exclusivity,
mm,
then that sort of, sometimes I think that can be quite difficult for modern women to kind of navigate that, because maybe that feels like there's a pressure that
mm,
I need, and maybe the guy's putting pressure. But if he's putting pressure and you are not on the same page, that's a sign that maybe he's not the right person. If he's putting too much pressure and he's not respecting you,
mm,
when else would he not be then respecting you? So yeah, so kind of keeping that as a sort of rule for yourself and for dating. So that allows you to really take it slow, and also you don't need to be kind of talking to someone all the time. All of these, yeah, actually that's an important point. Don't go on these text message marathons, because they really create like a false sense of intimacy,
ah, mm,
but it's not real. It's not really until you are in the, face to face, you are really observing someone, and kind of getting to know, so that you can observe. And if someone's just sending messages and what have you, yes, we get dopamine hits and so on, we get rewards, but it's not real, you
right.
know. So real relationships we build over time.
Yeah.
And I just need to slow down and focus on giving myself the love that I'm really looking for, then, so that I'm giving myself the love first. So then the attention, the male attention, maybe that's just the dating is just an additional thing to my life. It doesn't become the source of sort of attention and love, but I'm giving myself that first.
Yes. Ooh, I love that. And that is a wonderful bit of wisdom for us to wrap up on. Do you have any last things that you would love to share with our audience?
So I would love to share with the audience my pre-date bliss meditation, which can absolutely help with this, slowing the whole process down and preparing for first date, second date, whatever date, or even before going on. Dating apps can be quite triggering. So you might feel quite activated. So if you feel that you maybe need to kind of ground yourself and turn inwards before you use an app, for example, or even before you go on the date, and going and kind of connecting with yourself first. So then when you go on the date, you feel more present. And when you are more present, you're able to enjoy yourself better, but also you are then able to see his behavior instead of kind of worrying about that. Will he like me? And all, of course we always think about, will he like you? And so, but not just focusing on that what do I need to be for him to like me? But actually I can be myself more because I'm connecting myself with myself first. So it all goes back to the empowering myself to be kind of the the full person myself, and I'm supporting myself here, and then I can meet that other person from that place. And if they seem like they have the qualities and the interaction and everything, that's kind of good, and I'm enjoying myself, great, then that's really, then maybe there could be a second date, and so on. But yeah, so that's the purpose of the pre-date meditation, is to kind of help you really to get grounded and prepare yourself for a date, and so on.
Awesome. I love that. And thank you so much for sharing that gift with us, Dr. Mari. So my last reminder to all of our listeners is please make sure you check the show notes, because we will
Yeah.
drop Dr. Mari's links in there, including the link for you to access this pre-date meditation. That will be so helpful. Thank you again so much, Dr. Mari. I'm just so grateful for all the time you and wisdom you have shared with us today.
No, thank you. It's been so lovely to have this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Yes. And until we connect next time, I wish you lots and lots of peace and joy.
Oh, thank you. You too. Bye.